Linda Smith spent more than 20 years tortured by strange and life-threatening symptoms that no doctor could identify. Linda was born to a humble farm family in southern Minnesota. She was a strong little girl who learned the value of hard work at an early age. But when Linda hits puberty, her body begins to change in ways that she never expected.
I started just being very fatigued, lightheaded, dizzy, weak, very weak. By the end of the morning chores, I would be very sick.
Despite her strange symptoms, Linda keeps them to herself.
When you're one of 10 kids, you don't go to the doctor for every little sniffle. You just don't. If you had a headache, or if you were nauseous, or if you were coming down with the flu, you were still expected to get your chores done.
Linda does her best to manage her symptoms through the rest of her adolescence. And when she turns 18, she decides to leave the Minnesota cold and farm life for the bustle of Los Angeles. But almost as soon as she touches down in California, a new and very unexpected symptom begins to emerge.
I started to notice migraines. It was very dramatic. It was almost like when I got off the plane, I could feel something's different. They were immense. They were off the charts immense. It made it very difficult for me to focus.
Linda's chronic migraines, along with her dizziness and fatigue, make it next to impossible to concentrate on her new job. Desperate for some relief, she makes an appointment with a neurologist. He immediately orders a CAT scan to see if there's anything unusual about her brain. But the results come back normal.
And he said, you know, everything looks fine. You know, you are in Los Angeles. We are smog capital of the world. Maybe you have a sensitivity to the smog.
Linda resolves to manage her symptoms on her own and begins to experiment with various over-the-counter medications, but none of them seem to help.
The headaches were still very intense, just exhaustion. I felt exhausted. I really felt like I needed to get a better handle on my health situation. I thought, it's time for a change.
Linda decides she's had enough of the smoldering LA heat and smog and moves back home to Minnesota. When she walks out of the airport and the frigid air hits her, something odd happens.
Immediately, the headaches were gone. I mean, it was dramatic. It was like, oh my gosh, where are the headaches?
Linda is completely taken aback by the sudden improvement in her health. And as soon as she's feeling up to par, she decides to try living on her own one more time. After just 3 months in Minnesota, she packs her bags again and heads to sunny Florida.
As soon as I get into Florida and I get out of my car, it's like, wow, they're back. The headaches came back. They were at least 10 times more severe than any of the headaches that I even had in Los Angeles.
Despite the return of her dreaded migraines, Linda sucks it up and tries her best to manage them with pain relievers. She perseveres, and soon after landing a job, she meets Dan Smith.
I was working for a delivery company, and Linda was one of the secretaries at a business that I delivered to.
It isn't long before Dan notices Linda's headaches, but she assures him that they're nothing to worry about.
Linda was never interested in seeing a doctor. Going to a physician was not high up on her list.
But then Dan picks up on something that suggests Linda could be worse off than either of them realize.
One day we were out for a long walk, and we came back to our apartment. And as we walked up the flight of stairs, I noticed that Linda's pulse was quite fast. And I stopped and asked her if I could take her pulse rate. It was running so fast I had a hard time counting it. When I asked her about it, I was kind of surprised at her response.
I asked Dan, well, this has happened to you, right? This happens to you, right? He says, no, it doesn't.
She was in great shape, and she really was, and she worked out every day. It didn't make sense that her heart rate was running so fast by walking up a flight of stairs.
I was very afraid that maybe I could never have kids. This is a dream of mine. I wanted to be a housewife and a mother and to have a large family. I knew something was wrong, but I kept thinking about what the doctors in Los Angeles had told me. Don't worry about it. Try not to think about it. It'll get better.
Linda does her best to push through her painful symptoms, and when she and Dan find out they're pregnant in March of 1987, they're overjoyed.
She was ecstatic, and so was I.
I'm like, this is great. Hopefully everything will work out with this pregnancy.
And in November of 1987, she gives birth to her beautiful daughter, Christina. But within the first 48 hours after Christina's birth, Linda's symptoms take a dramatic turn for the worse.
She felt dizzy again, started to have some situations where she felt like she couldn't hold the baby.
And then, one day a few weeks later, she ventures outside for the first time since Christina was born.
This one afternoon, I decided I'm going to take Christina and we're going shopping. I hadn't done that in a while. It's a very warm day out, and I'm thinking, gosh, I could fall asleep. I'm just exhausted. And I turn to go into the subdivision, and when I do, I black out. And I come to only moments before I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned. I thought, my God, I could have gotten us killed. I can't ignore this.
Linda immediately makes appointments with a team of cardiologists and neurologists who promise her that they will get to the bottom of her terrifying episodes. But while they search for a diagnosis, the blackouts, or what the medical experts call syncope, continue.
It was happening quite frequently, and if I stood, sometimes I would only stand for 15 to 20 seconds, and I'd be in a gray out, and very quickly afterwards, I'd pass out.
Over the next several weeks, Linda is in and out of the hospital as she undergoes a battery of medical tests. While they can't seem to identify what's causing her heart rate to randomly race out of control, they suggest a drastic measure to help regulate it.
And he said, you know, I don't know what this is, but we really may need to consider doing a pacemaker implant.
Although the pacemaker could control her heart rate and help suppress the blackouts, Linda is horrified by the thought of having one.
80-year-olds have pacemakers, not 25-year-olds. I felt old.
Two days later, Linda is rolled into the OR for the surgery. And almost immediately afterwards, her life begins to change.
I get up and I use the restroom and I look in the mirror. I have a glow in my face. I thought, oh my gosh, this is what I look like with pink in my face.
After the pacemaker was put in for a long time, Linda saw a really marked difference in what was happening to her. Her episodes of passing out really went away.
Over the next few years, Linda and Dan have 2 more children. And despite her very busy life juggling her family's schedules, Linda is able to manage her migraines, dizziness, and fatigue one day at a time.
I'm able to get a pretty good handle on some of the other symptoms. I start to drink more fluid, and I start to take frequent rest periods throughout the day.
But on a very hot summer afternoon in 1993, Linda's world is once again turned upside down.
One day I decided I'm gonna mow the yard. And I'm about halfway through when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I get this immense pain that shoots across my chest, goes down my left arm, up my neck, and into my left side of my face. And I get into the house and I called Dan at work and I said, Dan, I'm really not well. "You need to come home." And I pass out while speaking to him on the phone.
Dan rushes Linda to the ER. Linda is discharged the next day without any diagnosis, referral, or prescription.
And I was getting very frustrated to the point where I kind of thought there's no real purpose in going back to another physician. They just don't understand this. Whatever it is, they don't understand it.
Linda Smith has been enduring myriad painful symptoms for almost as long as she can remember. But when her blackouts suddenly reappear without warning, the doctors have no answers for her. Linda is so discouraged, she swears off the medical establishment for good. But with Dan's encouragement, she reluctantly agrees to go to one last appointment with a team of specialists at Vanderbilt University. Within a month, Linda and Dan board a plane headed for Nashville. Dr. David Robertson is now in charge of Linda's case.
Well, I came by her room soon after she arrived, having heard that litany of problems that she had faced.
He sits down with us and he explains what tests they're going to run. And I think, let's do it.
Dr. Robertson's goal is to try to figure out why Linda's heart rate and blood pressure are so variable.
The body regulates blood pressure and heart rate so that they are at the appropriate level while you're lying down, while you're seated, and while you're standing. And that level must be high enough that all the blood can get right up to the brain.
First, Dr. Robertson gives Linda a specialized exam called a tilt table test, in the hope that it'll shed light on her abnormal heart rate.
The head of that tilt table gradually goes up as we are monitoring blood pressure and heart rate to give us the full picture of what the heart is experiencing at that time.
The test confirms that Linda's blood pressure and heart rate hit shockingly high levels when her head is elevated.
Normally, the heart rate might need to go up 10 beats per minute to keep blood going to the brain where it needs to be. In Linda's case, there was an immediate increase in her heart rate of 32 beats. And moreover, the blood pressure had to rise also.
Next, Dr. Robertson begins conducting a test to monitor Linda's catecholamine levels. Catecholamines are a type of neurotransmitter released from the nervous system to regulate heart rate and blood pressure.
What we then did was to assess the catecholamines. During our tests on the tilt table, we found that they were extremely elevated, and this confirmed the nature of her problem. It really had to be orthostatic intolerance.
Orthostatic intolerance, or OI, is a condition caused by a defective autonomic nervous system, the system that controls involuntary body functions like digestion, blood flow, and body temperature. Patients with OI can't make necessary adjustments to counteract gravity when standing up, and blood from their heart, lungs, and brain pool into their lower extremities, causing a drop in blood pressure. Suddenly, all of Linda's symptoms make sense.
If the blood flow to the brain is impaired, a great many symptoms can emerge, like fatigue, rapid heart rate, migraine, headaches. Some people with orthostatic intolerance, well, they have the feeling like you're going to pass out. That's quite common. But there were times when Linda completely lost consciousness. That is very dangerous if you are in situations where you can harm yourself.
While Linda feels a definite sense of relief after suffering for more than 2 decades, she can't help but wonder, why did it take most of her life to get diagnosed?
The difficulty in evaluating someone with these kinds of symptoms is that each symptom could have many different explanations.
The good news is that while there is no cure for orthostatic intolerance, it can be managed.
There are drugs which reduce the excessive stimulation of the heart.
There's one more crucial thing Linda can do to maintain her health. Since excessive heat can raise a person's heart rate, this can be especially dangerous for people with OI. The heat in Florida is only exacerbating Linda's problem.
So we made the decision that we would move back to Minnesota, where Linda's from originally. A climate that was better suited for Linda would be better suited for all of us.